This is Things Police See, First-Hand Accounts, with your host, Steve Gould.
Welcome to the podcast that interviews active and retired police officers about their most intense, bizarre, and sometimes humorous moments on the job. As the man said, I'm Steve Gould. Thank you for joining us, everybody. Thank you for being here. If you're a repeat listener, I really appreciate it. If you're brand new to the show, just as the intro said, you will hear the most raw and unedited police stories here, what the men and women of law enforcement actually deal with and see on a daily basis. So that's what you're in for. I am very grateful for all the 5 stars on Apple Podcasts we've been getting. I really want to get to 1,000. We're at like 940 something, which is great. But if we just get to that 1K, I would be so happy. What else has been going on with me? I went to the Y today. And have you ever played basketball with children? Because I noticed they don't sweat and they don't get tired, and I'm the exact opposite of that. So I'm pretty beat. I'm pretty pink. If you watch the YouTube channel, you can see exactly how pink I am. I got a new camera. And it's like about as fancy as you can get for a web camera. So it's not a great camera, but it's pretty okay. It lets you like adjust things. And before the show, I was adjusting it like crazy. I'm like, why is my face so pink? Then I had to go to the bathroom, so I went upstairs. And I'm like, my face is just pink. No amount of tweaking to the camera is going to fix my my pink face. So I've been trying to be healthier lately. It's important, and when you're in law enforcement, it's important not to put weight on too quickly because all of our uniforms are pretty tailored to us. So I've been doing like smoothies. You've probably seen that on my Facebook page or the Instagram and on Patreon. And I'm fasting. I'm doing intermittent fasting. And it's been working great, but the smoothies, if you hit a intermittent fast with a smoothie, it's like a brick in your stomach. So my wife and I ordered, or we got a case of Magic Mind. It's like this little shot of nootropics. If you listen to Joe Rogan a lot, you know nootropics are what you're supposed to be doing because he never shuts up about it. And I'm always hesitant to try these things because when I was like into lifting and exercising, ephedra was the thing. And I took a lot of ephedra, which is basically like amphetamine. And I remember seeing like frames in the gym and my heart was palpitating. But anyways, see Magic Mind everywhere. I get a case of my wife and I did it for 7-day stint, and I can tell you without reservation that the stuff's really good. Like I was getting sick of the stomachache I got from the smoothie, so I'd break my fast with coffee, and then I would have the Magic Mind with it, and it's a really good, clean. Doesn't upset your stomach. It doesn't make you jittery like too much coffee. It's good stuff, and I wouldn't tell you that unless I meant it. I did. Me and my wife tested it. She has autoimmune and she has celiac, and she took it, and she's a huge fanatic about it now. So that's my tip to you is Magic Mind for the week. If you're into it, I think you'll save money if you get a subscription to it. If you just buy it straight out, just buy a case, it's gonna be more money. But man, it's helped me. I think I'm gonna get back on the train with that. So guys, really excited for today's guest. I've been listening to this guy, and I've messaged him a few times. He's a busy man. He's an active copper, and he's had a podcast for I think since 2015. So he's been in the game for much longer than I always pride myself on being since like 2018 or 17. But this guy goes further than that. I remember when I first started my podcast, I saw him because there's very few of us, and he was also in Southern California, and he played radio calls like on his podcast, and I was like, how is that even possible? What is this voodoo this man is doing? But his podcasts he's got a really, really great podcast. And let me just give you his intro. In 2005, Garrett, I should have asked your brother, TeSlaa, looks like Tesla, but it's TeSlaa, left a successful career in the music and film industry to pursue a life in public service. Garrett is now an active duty 18-year law enforcement veteran and lieutenant for a sheriff's office in Southern California. Garrett has held assignments in patrol, gang investigations, community relations, internal affairs, and media relations, among many others, and has been involved in numerous critical incidents that have received international media attention. Garrett holds a master's in public administration with emphasis in organizational leadership and public sector management, and is a graduate of the Sherman Block Supervisory Leadership Institute. I don't know what that is, but it sounds important to me. Garrett hosts a successful podcast. This is what I was talking about, the Squad Room, devoted to personal development and for first responders. He's also a TEDx speaker and contributing writer for Police One and Law Enforcement Today. So you know him, I know him, you love him. Let's bring him on. Garrett, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Oh, it's an honor to have you, man. I know we're both busy and our schedules are crazy, but we've been kind of connecting for the last 6 months, trying to make it happen. So I'm super pumped that you were able to come on. In your intro there, you said you worked in, what were you doing in Los Angeles, or what was your in the entertainment industry?
Yeah, so my original career, like from freshman year in high school on, like I was certain I was going to be like the next David Geffen. I wanted to run a record label. I wanted to work in the music business. I wanted to work with rock stars my whole life, and did that from an early age in different forms. And then when I graduated from college, moved to New York City, worked at Atlantic Records there with. And Atlantic at the time in this 99, 2000 was like the label, like Matchbox 20, Kid Rock,
Nice.
Led Zeppelin, Stone Temple Pilots, Sugar Ray were all
STP.
there at that same time. And then eventually got moved to Los Angeles to take a job to start a record label for a film studio there in LA. Was doing that and did that for like 5-6 years, was like living the best life, right? As a young 20 something with a company credit card and access to all the clubs and concerts in LA. But eventually was looking for something different, something that was more in service. This is, not long after 9/11, and went through the LA County Sheriff's Citizens Academy and just to kind of like see what it was all about. And I did a ride along, and like so many other stories, that one ride along, and I was hooked. I was like, this is what I want to do.
That's cool.
So yeah. It's pretty wild. Total 180, in terms of career path, but have been appreciative of every moment of it.
That's incredible, man. That's really cool. Isn't it neat how I do have some friends in my inner circle that make a lot of money. They make a lot of money. And they think it's still so awesome that I'm a cop. They think it's like, because it's one of those, it's an ancient profession. It's honorable. And other guys, I might not be getting the money, but they look at it and they go, man, that's a cool job. They want to hear the stories. They want to know about it. You know what I mean? There's something about it that just is really cool.
Yeah. For as much, negative attention people think we get, just look at the top TV shows that are still going on today.
Yeah.
If it's a drama, it's based on a first responder profession, almost certainly. Because people are still curious about it. And it's such a mysterious world. And we interact with the part of society that no one else gets to see, that everyone's really intrigued by it. And that totally is what drew me in. And so, yeah, I have the same experience.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's really cool, isn't it? Like for my podcast, obviously I repeat this, I interview police officers, but I'll have someone contact me from, the Midwest or someone in a small town, and they're like, I have some great stories, but I'm just afraid that like I'm not Ralph Friedman, or I'm not some famous cop, or I go, it doesn't matter, man. People, and my friends have told me this before, people love to hear a cop talk about his job. They just love to hear it. Like even your little PD out in the sticks is like a clandestine organization to people. They're like, what goes on in there? What do you see? Because they know you're at everything. You're at every bad thing that happens in that community. There'll be a copper there, So it's kind of it's just really interesting. People like that's probably why we've had the success we've had with the show. You know what I mean? Having it out there, so people can get a little inside baseball to police work.
Yeah, for sure. And I for anyone who works a rural or a small department, like you can't discount the stuff that you see or that you experience as being less valid than if you were LAPD or NYPD or any of those others, because I've had plenty of interactions where I've been in a room with people from some of those massive, large agencies, and this is oftentimes at training, and we might have to share a critical incident we were involved in. And they will often point to my experiences as kind of mind blowing to them, because we may not have the resources of an LAPD or an NYPD, and we just have to get by with what we have. And so a lot of the rural people are doing a job that's very, very difficult, very challenging. And they just think that just because they're not one of the big ones, that it's a less valid experience, and it's really not true. It's even more so.
Yeah, I agree totally. Where I work now, it's a battle to get personnel and keep people there, and because it's tough. Like for a rural spot, you really want someone who's real experienced and can operate alone if they have to, but is also not going to be like so bored. Like they're not, they're kind of in the part of the career where they're not like looking for the action all the time, but also not lazy. You know what I mean? It's a really hard person to find. So we end up with a lot of young guys, and it's like we run one-man shifts, and their first bad domestic out in the woods, or suicide, or just anything, fatal accident, they're alone for a long time until someone gets there. That it rings kind of unfair to me. Like it's like not fair to do that to a young copper, but that makes the trauma even worse when you're the guy. You're the man for like quite a long time, especially if the other towns are tied up and you have to have a trooper come. It could be half an hour. That's a long, scary moment for dealing with a call you've only dealt with a few times. You know what I mean? And when you tell city cops that, they're like, whoa, like we'd have like 10 guys roll to that. We just, they pig pile everybody, and it's like they're all, if you don't have a partner, there's someone right there right away. So that's something people should think about,
Absolutely. Yeah.
And you actually were, you said when we were talking before the interview, you said you've kind of done the gambit. You have experience kind of like the smaller town policing, and of course a busier area as well. Working for a sheriff's office, you can kind of move around, which is really what's cool about the sheriff's office, I think. Do you think it's split down the middle for you, or do you prefer one to the other?
I've always gravitated towards the more urban or suburban environments where there's just kind of a higher volume of calls, and I can't sit still for very long, so I like that. And I like being able to come in every day, and it was kind of a what's going to happen today, and just the variety of stuff that comes in that environment. When I moved to one of our more rural stations for a while, first as a sergeant, and then I later went back as the lieutenant, but I didn't really understand how different you need to police in a rural place like that. Like if you're a one-man shop like that, or for us, we weren't that small, but it's the kind of area where your backup could be 20 minutes out. And we have this massive geographical area that you have to think differently about how you police because of those things, right? I don't get to have 10 cops there in a heartbeat. It was fun for other reasons, and like it was a challenge to like develop that skill set for myself, because I had to really change how I policed in that environment versus what I was used to.
Right. You're like a local celebrity. Like, hey, there's the sheriff.
yeah. It was everyone knows you, good or bad, and or they get to know you fast. Word travels that you're a new guy in the area.
Right.
It's just, and it's one of the things that fascinates me about policing is it takes all kinds, right? Like, it really does. Like you need the SWAT cop who's the tactical athlete, hardcore guy, but on the other end of the spectrum, you need someone who's good with kids, like an SRO, and then you need someone who's good with the budget, like an admin person might be. And so all of these people are still wear the same badge, right?
Yep.
Same patches on their shoulders, and it's such a huge, diverse group of personalities. And when you work a rural station like that, you have to wear not just so many more hats, but you have to be able to function in each of those roles a lot more than if you were in a large or in an urban area where you kind of get to stay in your lane. You don't really have to challenge yourself so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's something I really like about the structure of police work, is that at least everybody has to start in patrol. You know what I mean? Like you might be a quick riser or whatever, but it's not like that in the corporate world. Like it's they do what they want with whoever they want. But with patrol, at least and part of the frustration too is when people they act like they never were in patrol, but you know what I mean. But everybody starts at the same place, and they got to go through the field training, and they got to be the new guy, and they got to shag calls, and then kind of you can climb the ladder from there. I like that about patrol. There's other great things about the public sector too, but with the public sector, they don't really. There's no there's really nothing like that. You can kind of just be plopped out because you got a buddy in management, you know what I mean? Or something like that, like almost immediately. So I kind of like that about police work, the kind of that proving grounds, which usually rings true, but we've all dealt with the guy that got, plucked out super early to detectives and then was climbing the ladder before you knew it. And you're like, this guy even ever go to a call? But it's rare. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For me, patrol was my favorite part of my career, and being a patrol sergeant will always be my favorite job in policing. I did most of my first 13 years on patrol.
Yeah.
And it'll always have a special place in my heart. And it bugs me too when people, are looking for that promotion, looking to get to detectives or whatever, and become dismissive of what patrol really does. And there's plenty of agencies out there culturally that, you go back to patrol is like, it's looked at as like, a slap on the wrist, or
Right.
like that's the last thing you want to do is have to go back to patrol. Like that's the backbone of policing right there.
Yeah,
Like,
they're doing all the work.
if your skill set isn't good in patrol, then it's gonna be a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. My dad says exactly what you just said because he retired a lieutenant, and he said that his favorite job ever was before he became lieutenant. He was a sergeant long enough that he became badge 1 sergeant, and he said it was the best job ever. It was great because he had the seniority, but he was still in the patrol, and he was with and that's how it worked on the East Coast where we are. Is like when you become a lieutenant or higher, it's essentially for most departments you're out of the union and you're kind of negotiating your own thing with the city or the town, or there's a admin union or something, but you're kind of all of a sudden you're the guy that's like denying time off or ordering people, or you're now all of a sudden you're not the president of the union. You're in opposition to what they want to do sometimes, and he just hated that. He hated that part of it for where he worked. It was let me step that back. He didn't hate it, but he liked being sergeant so much better. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Kind of like what you said.
When you're a sergeant, you have that small unit, whether you run just a couple people or you run a dozen, but like you have the immediate ability to interact and engage and like create change. And especially as a sergeant and as a deputy, I never once left work wondering if what I did that day was worth a damn, if I contributed or not. Because I always knew I could always look back at the day and look at the stuff we did, the calls we went to, the arrests we made, the cases we investigated, and go like, that was a day well spent. I spent my day in a worthy cause. And it's really easy to do that. As you get a little higher up, it starts to become a little more muddy in terms of like, what am I doing on a daily basis to, keep this community safe or contribute or be of service? Because it's not as apparent. And so that's something that you have to navigate too as you promote up.
Yeah, I've seen some real sharp guys become chiefs at like smaller agencies, like in their like late 30s, and it's like, man, and they end up missing it. You know what I mean? Because you're gonna sit in that. Once you're a chief, it's kind of like, that's it, man. It would be weird for you to go somewhere or to go back to patrol somehow. Like you're just the chief, and that's the next 20 years of your career is you're that guy. You're the kind of the talking head of the department. You're not really. And I even on the radio where I used to work, on the coast of Massachusetts, you'd hear him when they were newly chief stop a car, and everybody's like, what is he doing? Why is he pulling cars over? Because he misses it. He wants to stop a car. He wants to get out of the office. He wants to go for a ride. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Garrett, can you tell me the first time you responded to a call that like gave you an adrenaline dump? The first hot call you went to as a young officer.
It's funny because I knew. Because I listened to your show, I knew you were going to ask me some version of that question. And I was thinking, okay, this question's coming up. Like, what do I do? And I like to blame it on 18 years because it's been a long time, the sleep deprivation has burned my memory. But I couldn't come up with like that first distinctive recollection of like what was the first time. One that sticks out though early on was a traffic accident, and it was this whole story is crazy, so I'll try and keep it tight. So it was a highway call, and it was a vehicle versus pedestrian on the highway, and I just happened to be really close by. So I roll up, I'm running code, and I roll up, and it's probably like midnight, 1 a.m, which is not a great time to be on the highway, of course, because the bars are closing at 2 o'clock. Right. And so you're getting that kind of traffic, right? And what had happened was a semi had pulled over on the side of the road. It had kind of broken down, and the driver had popped the hood of his semi and was, for some reason, standing on the wheels of the truck, working on his engine on the road side of the emergency lane. So he was kind of sticking out into the number 2 lane, the slow lane of the highway. And unfortunately, a truck came by and sideswiped him and took him out.
Ooh.
And so I got there, and he's the driver's already in agonal breathing, which, as cops, we know that's not a good thing. Having a hard time getting a pulse. And so I start doing my best version of CPR as a young, now very scared deputy who's trying to deal with this problem. And some good Samaritans had pulled over who had seen him laying there, but he's laying in the number 2 lane. I'm doing the CPR, and I realize I'm in traffic and I've got headlights coming at me.
Yikes.
And, again, time of night, scary. So end up having to like drag him off to the side of the road, and we're trying to work on him. Unfortunately, he ends up passing away. And the first Good Samaritan who stopped kind of described what happened. There was some damage left behind by the vehicle that had hit him, and we knew it was going to be like a dark green pickup truck because a side mirror had come off. So the Good Samaritan, we get his information, send him on his way. He goes home. He calls us not 10, 15 minutes later and says, I just got home and I pulled into my apartment complex parking, my carport, and my roommate's home, and he drives a green pickup. Uh-oh. And it's missing its side mirror, and the side is completely scraped up. And so what ended up happening was, just randomly, this first guy who saw this, who was on his way home from work, he had nothing to do, wasn't at the bars with this guy, witnesses or is the first one to witness or see this thing, calls 911, ends up going home, and the guy that actually caused the accident, caused the manslaughter death, was his roommate. And wow. And so he called us back, and we eventually went in there and arrested him. But that was a wild one, and that was very early on in my career.
That is totally. What are the chances, especially in SoCal? So many places, so many people.
Right. I can't imagine what the odds would have been. Yeah.
Damn, that is intense, and that's scary, man. Especially on like scene awareness, scene safety, you really can kind of lose it, especially when you're newer, when you're so concerned with someone who's dying. You're not. That's what they try to drill that into you in academy, like scene safety, then the accident, that type of thing. But that's not always how it goes down because we're human. You see that person dying, and you're laser focused.
Yeah. Thank
goodness you didn't get smoked.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, he was literally died. He died in my arms, and thankfully I didn't go with him by staying in traffic.
Man, that's crazy. Leads me to my next question. What is because this one was kind of strange as well. What is the strangest or most bizarre thing you've dealt with?
There's so many. This, there's just like cops who listen to this, like they probably won't even like raise an eyebrow because we just know that there are so many bizarre, strange things that happen, from like swearing you see ghosts to like the weird calls to the things that people do to themselves.
Sex toys.
Oh yeah. And that's probably the most bizarre thing. So I don't know how R-rated, but
no, let it rip, brother.
There. So in my department, we're also coroner's detectives, which they failed to mention in the brochure in the hiring process.
Oh, really? That's interesting. So you go to autopsies and stuff?
Yeah. So we do autopsies. Well, I mean, we don't cut them open. We have a forensics pathologist.
You witness them?
We respond to all deaths in the county, and we do the death investigation. And then we have a whole bureau of detectives who are dedicated to coroners investigations, but they're deputy sheriffs, and they're there on a specialty assignment like you would if you went to property crimes or person crimes.
Not for me, brother.
Well, like I said, they didn't mention this in the promotional material when I was trying to get hired, because I was literally
it's like joining the military.
I was on my ride along in the academy, and my the guy who I was riding with kind of offhanded mentions coroners investigations, and I was literally like, I'm sorry, what?
Yeah.
Like, ew. So that was definitely not something I was ready for. So okay, so bizarre, crazy story. This involves a death. And you touched on it there with the sex toy thing. It was a man who had passed away, and we got a call to check the welfare like you do, like the mail's piling up. Someone that nobody's seen him for a while, and um, I'm trying to be nice in telling this story, but I really can't tell it without just being completely explicit. And so
you do you, man. Let it rip.
So, we're doing the check and we get the whiff. You're like, oh yeah, he's in there.
Yeah.
And what we end up finding is a sunroom in back has kind of been converted into like a makeshift bedroom, and he had an entire room of floor to ceiling DVDs of porn, and he had died in a lazy boy that he had reclined, and he had this whole system set up that he could do all the things that people do when they watch porn at arm's reach. And he was very, very obese. He was about 400 pounds at least.
Oh boy.
And he was buck naked when we discovered him. And I just remember things like he had swinging tables so that he could access his keyboard or other toys. And there were things wedged in places that you don't want them wedged, especially when you're decomping.
Not be wedged.
Yes, a variety of lubricant choices were within hand's reach. And it was like this entire chamber of pornography and masturbation. And it was the gross, like, you don't want to touch anything in there.
Yeah.
You're like gloving up your glove ups. And now we got to get this guy who's seeping into the lazy boy because we don't get to call the medical examiner's office.
Oh, you guys actually move the bodies and stuff?
We move the bodies.
Oh my!
Like we stuff them into the body bags and all that. And so, yeah, we're trying to drag this 400+ pound dude who's naked and lubed up and decomping into a body bag and get him out of there. And then to have the conversation with his mother without giving her the story I just told you, so that she can keep this picture of her son that's not that. That was definitely one of my most bizarre calls.
That is absolutely disgusting. Just give me a bloater and it's like ruins my day. Never mind all the extras you're dealing with.
Oh yeah.
Dude, that's sad. I mean, what a sad life too. I mean, poor guy. Like that's what he's resigned himself to do. It's just, oh man, that's brutal. I think those, I think more stories like that they're going to become more and more prevalent the way we're headed here with technology and the overuse of all that stuff and the stimulation and the dopamine and whatever else all the smart people are saying about us and our devices. That's like the perfect, it's like almost like suicide by devices, by maximum pleasure or whatever.
Yeah. It's like the what's that experiment with the rats and cocaine, right? Like if you get them to do it, and they're just the dopamine hit, and they just can't. I agree, we're going that way, and it's doubly so because with that scrolling, we're not talking to each other. We're not interacting face to face. We don't have to go out and like be humans, and so we do end up. I think we're ending up with a group or a generation or even just a whole society that's closed off from each other, and we don't know how to talk to each other anymore.
Yeah, it's really weird because it's like for a long, long time it was like the progressiveness of the culture was like sex was more permissible and all that, and it was kind of just like the way things were unraveling. And then I heard recently there's a study that like this generation coming up now entering their teens are like delaying the first kiss. They won't hold hands. They think sex is like weird and yucky. It's almost like Demolition Man, when they're like, he's like, Sandra Bullock wants to have, or they want to have sex, or in John Spartan, Sylvester Stallone's character, and she's like, oh, we don't touch. And they put these weird helmets on or whatever, kind of like cone heads. It's like they're, isn't that odd though? Like it's and it's for all the wrong reasons. It's not because of purity or morality. It's because they're not comfortable with other people. They're not comfortable interacting with people. Like in person.
You see it even in policing with what sometimes is called the COVID cops. cops who came through an academy or during their training or during COVID, when you were not only just discouraged, but really punished if you went out and made face-to-face contacts with people. And so there's a whole, I think it's a small generation, but a generation nonetheless, that has found a reason not to be proactive, to sit in the parking lot, because they don't know, they didn't never developed a skill of talking with people that might disagree with them, that might challenge them. They never got used to that idea that you just have to be nosy as a good cop. Right? I remember that being a hard one for me. Like,
Right.
what do you mean I'm just going to ask this guy 20 questions about where he's going, where he came from, who's who in his, zoo, and who's that in the car, and are you on probation or parole, you've been arrested before, all those things that now roll off the tongue as like standard. I got no problem getting in people's business now. But we have a whole group of young cops who never got that skill because they never got the chance to practice it during COVID. And so I think that's going to be an issue for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that will follow that generation. And then there was like, here anyways, there was like, they were desperate to graduate cops. So they had like hybrid COVID academy where it was like when they could, they would get together in person. But then also we'd have candidates or recruits report to the station and do stuff on Zoom. And it was like, you're getting chewed out by the DI over Zoom. Is kind of like, it's hilarious. It makes it like even more like, even if you're aware it's just a game, it's even more ridiculous when it's a laptop. It's like, sorry. It's like,
right.
What are you going to do to me?
Yeah.
You're 20 towns away. Yeah, man. Yeah. That is a sad and disgusting call. I can't believe that, I don't like it when the, like I've said this before in the podcast, but like I've had the coroner show up and it'd be like a small female and like need help. And I'm like, no, you gotta bring another person. Like I'm not this. I don't want to be moving someone around like this, because when you move them, that's when if it already smells, but then if I've had bloaters before that, like there was no odor, but as soon as they move, things are going to start flowing. And then it's like, I have the weakest gag reflex. It like runs in my family, just like like you can, it's bad. I have to like stop, recover, and then, the Vicks or just breathe through my mouth, but then you're breathing that through your mouth. So just that idea makes me dry heave. Would not be a good homicide guy, I don't think.
So funny. Yeah. I've had purge burst all over me before, like a rotisserie.
You're kidding me.
Off the leg. I had a case once where a guy, he had sat up in bed and then collapsed had a heart attack, collapsed backwards. So his feet were on the ground, but he's lying on his bed. And we get there, and of course he's a hoarder, and he's got the heater on at like 80 degrees, but now it's like August and it's been running for 3 or 4 months. And I was puking in the front, but we go to move him, and his leg comes off in my arms like a rotisserie chicken leg.
My gosh.
And out come all the maggots from his crotch area that had been living inside of him and eating him from the inside out. And just spilled all over me, all over my legs, my uniform. and I ran outside, it was dry heaving. I don't think I'd had dinner yet, so I didn't have anything in my stomach, thankfully, but I remember dry heaving so hard. And the cop who was working with me had used to be a coroner's detective, and he's like, no big deal for him. And he comes out just laughing at me, because just hysterical. He thinks it's hilarious.
Dude,
that we're dealing with that. Yeah. I got so many decom stories that that's just so gross. And one thing that's funny is, okay, so the funny part of this is that at our coroner's bureau, they use a very specific like Glade scented candle smell to help cover up some of the stench.
Okay.
And it's like that cinnamon smell, right? And so it's like really, really strong. And for years and years and years of my career, every time you walk into that building, you would just smell the cinnamon Glade scented candle smell mixed with this weird off odor, right? And I come home one day, this is years ago, and my wife had bought some new scented candles for the home, and she had picked the cinnamon Glade scented candle. I walk in my house and immediately kind of lurch, like,
yeah,
and was like, can't have that here. Like, that's not going to work. That one's not going to work for us. Like, you can pick the ocean scent or the white linen or whatever, but we can't have the cinnamon scented candles around.
Yeah, take it back. Smell is powerful, man. I mean, I remember when hand sanitizer became like everybody was using hand sanitizer. It always reminds me still of the booking room because like 2/3 of the people are drunk and it's that alcohol-y smell. So that whenever I smell a hand sanitizer, someone uses it, I always think of booking a drunk. I just can't. I can't. I mean, it doesn't bother me, but it makes me think of it every time. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, that's funny.
Nowhere near. I don't. I think the smell of cinnamon gum on people's breath, I have always thought is kind of gross. It's not like minty. It's something about the cinnamon smell in gum and stuff I never like. So I would be fully on that train if I was exposed to that scenario. Damn, man. Garrett, tell me, how do you say your last name?
TeSlaa.
TeSlaa.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like the extra A is a W.
I don't know how I'm everybody knows listening to the show I'm notoriously bad with pronunciation, so I apologize.
Yeah, it's all good.
Can you tell us about your most intense or terrifying call?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of my jobs that I've had has been as the team leader or team supervisor for our underwater search and recovery team, our dive unit, right? And I'm here on the coast. We've got 110 miles of coastline in my county, so we've got a lot of ocean water. And we have some islands called the Channel Islands that are part of our jurisdiction that are about 20 miles off the coast. Catalina is part of that same chain for people who are familiar with the area.
Oh, yeah.
But we're a little further north, but we have the Channel Islands in my jurisdiction as well. And so on my anniversary of all days, in September 2nd of 2019, my wife and I, it was a Monday. My wife and I were going to take the day off and go do some wine tasting and just kind of enjoy the day and celebrate our anniversary. And I woke up to my phone blowing up at about 5:30 in the morning, telling me that there was a dive boat 20 miles offshore that was burning and 34 people are presumed dead.
Whoa.
And that the boat is now sinking. And so as the dive supervisor for the team, it was now on my job to figure out what to do.
Yeah.
It was the largest, ended up being the largest scuba dive recovery ever. We never found,
I remember hearing about
the
it.
FBI. Oh yeah, it was called the Conception, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was the Conception dive boat disaster in 2019. And so I've had a lot of big calls in my life. I was part of the debris flow response that killed 22 people here in 2018. I was part of the active shooter response when we had someone drove around shooting people and killing 7 people in 2014.
Oh, yeah.
But this was the first one where it was like on me to figure out how do we do this?
That's a lot of pressure.
How do we go 24 miles out to sea, hopefully recover all 34, which we eventually did over 2 weeks. And what are the resources I need and who can I call for help? And, and then it was a great lesson for me in understanding or being willing to ask for help and also understanding where my skill set ends and someone else's begins and asking for them to take control in their strengths.
I bet.
But it was, that first day what's funny is like 5 days before this happened, we had trained with an allied agency for a very similar style event. And we trained with them because they've got larger boats and they've got a lot of resources that we don't have. And they're just great people to work with. So we've kind of developed this relationship over a couple of years. And then 5 days later, we have this actual call. So we call them and they, of course, drop everything to go help us. And a bunch of other agencies eventually came in too. But going out there that first day and knowing that the ocean was calm, it was sunny, and there was no evidence of a boat having sunk or been on fire, at least initially, until you start looking a little closer.
Weird.
And that really eerie feeling, knowing that 34 people had just perished that morning.
Just below the surface. Yeah, that's crazy.
Just below the surface. Yeah, about 65 feet down at that point. And so that ended up being a search where we used, I think, 99 divers from 13 agencies. We had 15 vessels on site. It was
wow.
Eventually a joint task force between my team and the FBI leading. with Coast Guard assisting. That eventually became a criminal case that the FBI took lead on.
Did the Coast Guard take the bodies? Is that what they were doing?
No, Coast Guard provided scene security really and just kind of coordination, but it was an incident where, again, we're the coroners, and it was in our area, so we were recovering the victims, but then my other teams were processing the victims as well, and we left that first day with 13 body bags.
Wow.
Heading back with us to the docks, and there's some pictures that were famous at the time on the NBC Nightly News and other national news outlets of me and my team hoisting the bags onto the dock. And we turned around and went back and did it again the next day and the next day after that. And we did that for like 9 days. We had to stop because of some rough seas for a couple of days. We had one outstanding victim that we just couldn't find for the longest time. And luckily, after almost 2 weeks, we were able to bring her back to her family. And so that was the biggest event in my career. I think that there's no way to make sense of a tragedy like that, where like 34 people just perished and also panicked and were they knew they were dying.
Yeah. And what exactly happened to the boat?
The belief is that people had piled their lithium ion batteries on top of each other, like GoPro cameras and cell phones and computers and stuff, and they had to kind of put them all in one jack in the kitchen, and they heated up, and eventually something sparked a fire there.
Wow.
So a fire started. Everyone's already asleep down below deck. There were four, I can't remember, if employees that were sleeping above deck that saw the fire, spotted it, did something to try and put it out, and then ended up abandoning ship. But the 34 people who were below deck sleeping were never able to escape.
Wow, that's intense, man. I can't imagine it's obviously a huge tragedy, but like I'm putting myself in your shoes and the where do you start type of thing. Like, you know what I mean? Like when this is like all right, this is your baby. Let's get it going. That had to have been so much pressure.
It was, I didn't realize it at the time because I think I was just so focused, like all cops, right? Like what's your first goal is to get there, like get to the scene, right? And so you don't always realize like you're driving 130 miles an hour to code 3 to the emergency because you're focused on wanting to get there, because that's when you can start to be of help, right? And so my goal was just to get out there. And when it's 25 miles out to sea, that's not the easiest thing to accomplish. And so I remember like I was making phone calls on the way down, just like Google searching recovery companies that specialize in like salvaging stuff and like
Towboat US and stuff like that.
Exactly. Yeah. But like totally not I didn't need to worry about that at that moment, because like that was going to be days, if not weeks later. And it was going to be it never occurred to me that this was going to be like an FBI joint task force thing, that the Coast Guard would be there, or that I'd have 99 divers on site for this kind of thing. Like it was just kind of funny. Like I think the culture, especially, in policing, is like you handle it. You're given a problem, you handle it. And so I was like, okay, me and my 13 divers are going to go handle it, and not realizing the scope of what we were about to encounter.
Yeah, I can imagine. I've never been involved in something that large. We had a plane crash when I was a natural resource officer, and the Coast Guard was there, and the FAA and FBI and stuff. But they had, it was weird. I think they had like the big parts of people went to the dock, and any residual parts found went out to the Coast Guard boat. I don't know why they did it like that, but that's maybe because FAA was in charge of doing it, but that's kind of how it worked. But when you, as a police officer, when you experience a critical incident that large, what does the agency do for you guys who obviously worked all those hours? I mean, there's a debriefing, I'm sure. Do they, in California, they offer they just say, hey, just do you need some days off, or what do they offer up to you to just kind of get you back to neutral,
Yeah. It's getting better. And I think that situations like this and the debris flow that I mentioned before, like those have shown a light on the need to consider these things. My agency's been doing the critical incident debriefs for a number of years. I personally don't find them to be helpful, and they can actually be very a negative experience for a lot of officers, depending on how they're done.
Some people really break down during them too, and it kind of makes you relive that a little bit. You know what I mean? It makes it stressful. Not anything against people who have to get something out, but I know what you're saying. Right. I feel the same way, kind of.
Well, and I don't want to throw any shade towards the idea of therapy or counseling at all, because I've done all of it. I've tried everything. Absolutely. And I've done everything, and I've been in, I was shortly before the conception, I was diagnosed with PTSD. And so I was kind of navigating that and struggling with that and like trying to figure out my path through those things. My concern with like the debriefs is that if you don't have a culturally competent person running it, it's just a check mark for the agency to say they did it.
Okay.
And then you really need buy-in from your administration that it's valuable. And what that requires usually is that they stay the hell away. Right. And like, you're not going to have a successful debrief with a group of people who all have to trust each other, but also have to go to work together. And like the next one might be tomorrow. That's the thing about this job, is like the next conception might be the next day.
Right.
And we still hold on to this idea that we have to show that we're ready at all times and we're able to handle it. And when, so those debriefs can really devolve into just a lot of posturing, particularly if command staff shows up for them. And if the command staff's there to show their support, like, cool, but then leave. But no, I know as a lieutenant now, I know that if I ask a group a question, I'm going to get different answers than if I ask individuals. And so that's kind of what my hang up is with the debriefs. It's not that it's not valuable to talk. It is. It's valuable to talk to someone who has some skills and some training in how to navigate those things, but it just has to be done the right way. I use my own stuff. I have, my podcast is really basically about personal development and like navigating a lot of the traumas and stuff like that and trying to figure out what works and what doesn't. And so I think I had a pretty good handle on it by that point. But nonetheless, it's always a work in progress. And as long as you stay on the job, it's like a perishable skill is our mental health. You got to stay on it.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had some recent episodes with officers sharing their PTSD and stuff like that. And it's critical, especially to hang on to keep people being able to do the job. And sometimes you can't. Sometimes people just have to leave because it's too much. But
sure.
And isn't it? One of my earliest episodes I did was an Inglewood officer, and he worked gangs and stuff, and he saw, of course, crazy things. But he was also a Marine, and he said the hard thing about police work to like get a handle on was when you're overseas on a mission, it comes to an end and you come home, which is still hard, and there's still things they deal with. He said when he worked for Inglewood for all those years, it was never over. Like, you know what I mean? Like you said, you have to be ready for the next thing. So you do something crazy, you see something insane, you almost get killed, you're involved in whatever it is, and you're sitting there eating, he would say, just sitting there eating supper thinking, this is tomorrow now. Like, this is like, I'm going to do it again. You're looking at your family, but you're going, essentially to him, in his mind, it was like going to war again. Like, you're never not going to war when you're constantly subjected to those calls with no break,
Absolutely. I've had tier 1 operators. Like I've interviewed guys from SEAL Team 6, from Delta, from Green Berets over and over and over again. And to a man, they all say, I don't know how you do it. I couldn't do that job.
Right.
And they almost always point to that idea that it's back again tomorrow.
Yeah. It's just part of it's your job, literally. That's it. So
yeah.
do you,
go ahead.
No, go ahead, Garrett.
I was just gonna say, like, think about, like, if they were open and honest at the police academy or in the recruitment process about what you will experience, and then the challenges you might, not always, but you might have to confront with that idea that it's over and over again. Like, people wouldn't come to work the next day, right? So it's like, it's almost built into the system that we have to pretend it's not here, it's not a thing, and we have to pretend that we're good,
Right.
in air quotes, and that because no one's going to come to work if that's the case every day. And so it's not a negative about the industry. It's like, it's just kind of a part of how we have to function. It's very bizarre.
Yeah, it's kind of a delicate balance, right? Because you want people to keep doing it, but you also want to support them and not have a counselor or clinician tell them
Right.
to leave the job, because
Right.
it's going to happen to everybody. Yeah, that's super interesting. Before I ask you the next one, I was curious to ask about the TEDx talks. How is that? That's, I mean, I watch those sometimes. They're super captivating depending on the speaker. But how long have you been doing that?
I just did the one, and it was in 2018. It was a result of the debris flow, and it was a conversation about my experience there, and so it's interesting because I don't have a fear of public speaking. I know a lot of people do, so I guess it's one of my skill sets. But nonetheless, when you do a TED Talk, it's all memorized. It's all, there's no teleprompters, there's no screen.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the TED rules, like if you follow them anyway, which is the people who put on the one I did followed them. Like, you're not supposed to have like visual aids or a PowerPoint to reference and that sort of stuff. So it's all based on memory. So, there's probably 100 hours of practice into the talk for 13 minutes just to make sure that I stayed on it. Because the last thing I wanted to do, of course, was vapor lock and freeze
Brown out.
But it was,
Yeah.
but it was a wonderful experience to get to do that. I got to speak on the same stage on the same day as a really good friend of mine. That was a great experience. Got a great reception. And I was just talking about how the talk was titled "The Importance of Second Responders," but it was really about how, in the aftermath of this major debris flow, how regular citizens just kind of stepped up and filled the holes in that social net that we couldn't accomplish.
Oh, cool.
And that was the only way out of this problem was in that. And I used some examples from like 9/11 and some homeless issues in LA, just examples of people kind of doing what they can. And this idea that, we as first responders can't do our job unless people step up as a second responder in whatever way they're able to in their private lives.
Right, like the fire department, second responders.
I wasn't going to make a second
kidding,
responder
fire
joke, but-
guys. Just kidding. We love you. We know you're good. All right, that's very interesting. Garrett, can we shift gears here? Can you tell us about a heartwarming encounter you've had on the job?
Luckily, I have a lot, and I still love interacting with like elementary school kids, because they don't hate us yet. They haven't been unless they have an older brother, they don't have this perception of us,
Right.
and they just love seeing us.
I'm the
and it's
same. I
so
love the
fun.
kindergarten class, man. The best. Can I see your gun? What's that?
Yeah, I will go talk to elementary school age kids all the time. And so, like, recently we had a swatting call here where, someone claimed that there was that there was a shooting on our high school campus. That's actually pretty close to my house. And so it sounded legit at the time. So of course everybody rolls and it's chaos. And, we figure out pretty quickly that it was a swatting, but the local elementary schools in the area had to be put on lockdown. And one of those was my son's elementary school. And it's pretty close to this area. So after everything settled down, I just happened to be working a patrol shift that day. So I was in like full patrol uniform, not in my lazy lieutenant outfit. And
Pancake holster and cuffs.
there it is. And so I decided, I'm going to roll by his school because they were in lockdown for quite a while. And, this is just an example because there's so many heartwarming examples, but this one was just like, I felt like that was where I needed to be that day. Was like, these kids had just been like, lights off in the dark, having this experience. They're not being told what's going on, but they know it's scary and they know what a lockdown is for.
Sure.
is it on their campus or it's not? And so it was just a great moment to interact with these kids, let them know everything's fine. They got to see the cop who was walking around smiling big
Right.
instead of, gun out and helmet on, and talk to the teachers and just remind them that, we're there, and we take it seriously, and, everything's fine. It was a big false alarm on this one. And what I've developed throughout my career is, I guess, an awareness or an ability to be aware of those moments as they're happening, so that the heartwarming stuff happens pretty frequently.
That's
When you
great.
understand, when you can go to work and understand, like, this is what I'm meant to do, or that I'm supposed to be here at this moment for this purpose, whether it's a death notification or it's saving someone from themselves. Like, that idea that this is exactly where I'm supposed to be in the world, that will give you that sense of that heartwarming story without the need for any input from anybody else, because you take it with you wherever you go.
Absolutely. That's beautiful, man. I love that. Great heartwarming story. Garrett, popular question here. Advice to new police officers, people thinking about it, people on the fence, people in police academy and backgrounds. What would you say to them after all your years of experience?
I would say that you need to come in with a realistic understanding of what you might face. And so do ride-alongs. I think the book Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement is really a book that everyone should read before they become a cop. I hand that book out to everybody who gets assigned to my station, but I think it's a book you should be reading before you get in the academy. My first time reading it, I thought, oh, that sucks to be that guy, but man, I'm lucky that's not me. And then the second time I read it, went, oh, that's been me the whole time.
Oh yeah.
So you may not be receptive to the ideas, but you should at least be aware of them, of these ideas of hypervigilance and hypovigilance, and how it interacts with your body and your mind and all that sort of stuff. Then understand, like, why is it you're coming into the job? And are you here because you want to serve and you want to be part of something larger than yourself, and you have a vision for contributing something in a positive way? Great, then do it. If this is a job that you're looking at because the pay's good and you got no other options, trust me, there's other options out there that are far more better for your family or your own health or your own relationships than this job. This I'm corny, and I still think this is a calling. Like, you can't do this job. You can't work a Tuesday night at 3 a.m. and just say that it's a job. And the people that do are either hiding because they're not comfortable with the idea of being so passionate about it, or they probably need to leave the profession, because I wouldn't have been able to do this job if it was just a job. But if you have a sense of who you are and what you want to be in the world, and it involves being in service to others, then this is the greatest job on earth.
Absolutely, man. I agree 100%. Garrett, thank you for coming on, man. It was an honor to have you. Where can people find your podcast and find you on social media? Right above your head there, I have the Instagram. Is there a website as well?
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. This has been a lot of fun, and I've been looking forward to it after all the scheduling snafus we had to deal with. So Thank you.
It was great, man.
Yeah, at the Squad Room on social media. thesquadroom.net is my website. There's some resources there. There's some free downloads and some things that people can look at there. And then the podcast is the Squad Room, and that's available wherever anyone gets their podcasts.
Awesome. And check out the TED Talk. I'm going to check
that out.
TED Talk
on YouTube. Yeah,
very cool. Thank you, sir. I'm going to do the outro here. Can you hang out, or do you have to be somewhere?
I do have to be somewhere, actually.
Okay,
I would love to do a follow-up if you want.
Okay, great, man. Yeah, absolutely. Let's keep in touch, and I'll do the outro here, and have a good night, brother. It was an honor, like I said.
A lot of fun. Thank you.
Take care. Ladies and gentlemen, the great Garrett TeSlaa. Man, I'm not sure I could handle what that guy's handled, but it was an honor to have him on. It was really, really great stories, and I hope you enjoyed it like I did. Guys, thank you. Like I said before, the rating and reviewing is fantastic. And if you love the show and you want to support it, keep the boat afloat, Patreon's a place to do that. You can get there in the show notes. There's a link to it. Also, I will link all Garrett's stuff in the show notes so you can find him easily right there. And today is the part of the show when I like to thank the Patreon sponsors, and who I'm talking about. These are the sergeants on the Patreon level. I'm talking about the great Sarah Pomeroy, Andy Biggs, Greg Gadboy, Adam Mihal, the great Chris June, Gary Steiner, Jake Pinedo, John Shoemaker, Lauren Stimson, Lane Campbell, he's a handsome man, Seth Wright, William James Long, that's Deputy William James Long to you, sir, James Rose, Tony Fahey, the great Ben Peters, Braden Walker, Corey Payne, Jason Lau, the great Mike Wynn, Nathan Gowan, Sasha McNabb, the great Scott Minkler, the great Tammy Wall, Sean Clifford, just Dennis because he only put his first name, the Motor Cop Chronicles podcast hosted by Iceman, George Tessier, Nick Noose, Scott Young, the great Tom Connell, Wayne M. Miller, Dan Carlson from Burley Boards, Doug and Kelly Newman, love you guys, Joe DeVries, Dave Ellman, Elliot Sykes, the great Holly Vanover, Richard Tolles, love you buddy, Brittany Sims, thank you for the support, Christian, because that's all he wants me to say, and Jace Crow. You guys are great. I love that you support the show the way you do, and you truly, truly help me out. It enables me to pay for all the services I need to keep the show going. Equipment failures, which I've had plenty of lately, is all taken care of because people support the show through Patreon. So if you love the show, that's the place to do it, guys. Well, that's the show for this week, and I will see you next time.